Before we talk about yesterday, I'd like to talk about today and tomorrow. And there's no better way to do that than to introduce the new general manager of the Raiders, Mr. Mike Mayock. I believe his family is here. His wife, Mandy, his daughters, Leah and Michael, and the other part of the family is Mackenzie and Jack.
Nice job.
And we got that. Hey, listen.
That was really good.
And from that, I'm going to pass it over to John and let him let you know where we're
I'd just like to say, very excited about adding Mike Mayock to the Oakland Raiders. And Mike and I go back about 20 years, from 1995 when I was with the Eagles. We've been friends and associates for a long time. I know a lot of people in this business that love football, that study football, but I don't really know anybody that loves it and studies it more than Mike Mayock. And for the last several years, we've been, meeting behind the scenes on players, talking about one day maybe working together. And today's a really exciting day for me personally. I think our players will be charged by this. I think the ex-players, the future players, are going to really be excited about this acquisition as well. But welcome aboard, Mike. Really happy to have you here, man.
Appreciate it. Mark, thank you. Well, I'll tell you what, I've spent most of the last 15 years behind a microphone, and I got to be honest with you, I haven't been this nervous or this excited in that entire time frame. I think the last time I was this excited, I got cut by the Pittsburgh Steelers the next day. But I'm really happy to be here. I appreciate Mr. Davis. You have no idea, Mark, how much I appreciate being here, and thank you for, coming out and offering me this job. And John, what John and I was alluding to, 1995, I probably have had over 300 text messages, which I haven't had a chance to get back to anybody because we've been working all morning. But a couple of them were like Archie Manning. Archie Manning's going, you guys are a great fit. And the more I was just kind of scrolling through, all these football guys are reaching out saying, you and Gruden are a great fit. You guys love ball. You have a passion for it. You're going to make it work. So I think to just kind of highlight what this is all about is that John and I have talked a lot of football in the last 20 years. And I think what we're seeing is the formal unification of something that's been going on for a long time. I can't tell you how happy I am to be here. I'm happy to be a Raider. I'm starting to understand what that means. Once a Raider, always a Raider. And I'll tell you another thing is I'm not going to get into any other interviews I ever had except for one, and that was about 10 or 12 years ago, and I kind of flew out here clandestinely to meet Mr. Al Davis, and he took me into this building, and he hid me for about 8 hours, and he grilled me on everything, as you know. And I came out of that building that day with my head spinning. Nobody really knew for a couple years that he and I had talked about a potential job with the Oakland Raiders that long ago. So I think the harmonic convergence of what's happening today is kind of cool. And having said all that, I just got to tell you, I'm jacked. I'm juiced. I'm ready to go. And there's nobody I'd rather go to war with than Jon Gruden and Mark Davis. Questions?
We have a microphone to the side. Please raise your hand and key your along with it.
Macdonald, Bay Area News Group. For Mike and John, why do you think that I guess the lack of front office experience won't, I guess, be a hindrance in this?
It's a good question. I think it's a fair question too, and I think the one way to answer it from my perspective is that for the last 15 years, I think I've tried to be the GM for all 32 teams, and because of that, from a scheme perspective, I think I'm sound. I think I've been used to evaluating all kinds of different players at all kinds of different positions for every team in the league. What I don't have, and I was pretty honest with Mark and John when we talked about this position, is what I don't have is the everyday backup as far as the mechanics of running a team. Okay, but I've been in all 32 buildings for the last 15 years. I know what it looks like. I know what it smells like. I just need a little help with the mechanics.
And I'd just like to say that I know Mayock is going to energize our building. I know he's a great people person. He's got great people skills. He'll learn fast what he needs to learn. And he's already met with Sean Herrock. I think he's going to be able to adapt to the personnel that we have in place and put his own spin on things quickly. He's got great people skills, and he's a quick learner, that's for sure.
Josh Dubow with Associated Press. Mike, why is now the time for you to take this kind of job as opposed to, I'm assuming you've had, over the years, have had times where you could have gone into a team. Why now, and what makes this the right fit?
I've said for a lot of years that when the right opportunity came along for me personally, and from a big picture it was the right fit, I was going to make the move. And I'm not going to get into individual circumstances like I said earlier, but I never thought those two things converged. This is a situation where, again, the fit, okay, and that's what I mean by 300 text messages and all these football guys saying what a fit. And I felt the energy 20 years ago. I feel it even more. And I know we're going to argue about some guys, and I can't wait. I mean, because it really comes down to what do you think? You've watched all this tape. What do I think? And let's get to the right answer for the Oakland Raiders, right? It doesn't have to be your guy or my guy. Let's get the right answer. So all I can tell you is I felt the fit here more than I ever have.
John, you've coached the Senior Bowl. This will be your 4th time, and Mike, you are no stranger to Mobile, Alabama. For you two, what do you see that as an opportunity to really get into the trenches for the first time and have that opportunity to get your hands on some players?
Well, Mayock's going to run for office in Mobile. Honestly, the last time I coached the Senior Bowl as the head coach of the Raiders, we drafted Eric Barton, Rod Coleman. It was a great tool for us in Tampa and in Oakland. And we have 3 picks in the first round. We also pick in every other round. And we also have the potential to add players after the draft. But it'll give our coaches, I think, a chance to go to Mobile in front of the entire NFL and show what kind of coaching staff we have, show the energy, the enthusiasm that we have as a staff. We're going to sell ourselves to the players. If we can eliminate 2 or 3 players by coaching a Senior Bowl, sometimes that's just as important as finding 2 or 3 guys that you really want. But we're really excited. It'll be the 4th time that I've done it. And, you know, we have to do a good job in this draft. And the best way to do it is be as close as possible to the players.
And I've always felt like I did a better job when I got to know the players a little bit. You know, you take a Carson Wentz, for instance, and you know, he went to the Senior Bowl and kind of announced himself, okay? And I got to know him a little bit there. Then we go to the Combine. I interviewed him, spent some time. Let's go to Fargo, North Dakota. And when you start talking about quarterbacks, and every position for that matter, the more you find out what makes a kid tick, the better you can evaluate that kid. And I came away from Carson Wentz like banging the table at that point just because I felt so strongly about the kid. And that's just an example. And I think when you get to the Senior Bowl and you get the access to these kids and you know, the opportunity to see both teams practice, how they retain information, how they process information, both on an install basis and mechanics on the field, I think it's just a huge advantage. And we've been talking about this for several days now, that hoping that this would come together.
Malika Bobineau, Oakland Post. With your areas of expertise in football, obviously this wasn't one of the best seasons the Raiders had. So what do you see is necessary and demanding to focus on first in turning this franchise around?
I kind of look at it with the calendar in mind. In other words, free agency comes first on March 13th, and we've got to do a great job preparing for that. And you know, one of the great opportunities to come here and work with these guys is that there's, as John said, 3 draft picks, 11 overall, some money for free agency. So we've got to do a great job simultaneously crunching everybody that's a potential free agent while we're also working the college side. So from the way I look at it is we got to be ready first and foremost for free agency on the 13th, and then beyond that, do a great job at the draft. And that all happens simultaneously, and the opportunity is self-evident.
Paul Gutierrez from ESPN. For Mark and John, when did you guys zero in on Mike as the GM to replace Reggie? And Mike, from your perspective, what did you think of John's draft last year?
Well, I guess I'll go first. Over the years, I've talked with Mike on sideline prior to games for many years, always telling him how much I respected his outlook and measured approach to talent evaluation. And I've always felt that I would love to have him as part of the Raider organization. I didn't know in what role. And so we talked about it and joked about it and all of that stuff over the years. And when the opportunity came to talk with Mike this time around, he was one of the first people that we wanted to talk to, among others. And he hit it out of the park.
My turn?
Yes, sir.
Regarding John and the Raiders draft last year. It was interesting because when I did the draft last year, and I'm sitting next to Daniel Jeremiah and Charles Davis and all my guys, and we were kind of laughing between breaks, like this is starting to look like the old Raiders. It was kind of like physical traits, height, weight, speed that jump out at you, jump off the tape, dynamic kind of. You look at that left tackle. I don't know if anybody, you watched that game yesterday, and you can be negative about it. One of the things I took out was that first-round left tackle chased a guy down about 60 yards on interception, made a tackle on the 10-yard line. After that, Paul Gunther's defense made a 4-down stop, saved 7 points with that hustle play. And it wasn't just hustle, it was athletic ability, catching up a left tackle, right? And I'm like, wow. And then they went down and kick a field goal. It's 21-3 at half instead of 28-0. That gets me jazzed. I like that kind of stuff, okay? That's what I see in the left tackle. I see an awful lot of physical talent. Does he have a long way to go? Sure, but every rookie left tackle in the league gets thrown in like that, has a long way to go. And then P.J. Hall, you want to talk about explosive numbers, he jumps off the tape, jumps off the chart. What he ran in his 40, his vertical, all those kind of things. Again, second-round kid from a small school, played more snaps than he probably expected as a rookie. Does he have a lot to work on? Of course he does, but he's got the physical traits. And if you go through the rest of that Raiders draft, there were physical traits everywhere. And I just kind of felt like while I was sitting in the chair at NFL Network a year ago, it was kind of a return to the old Oakland Raiders and height, weight, speed, and let's be dynamic football players.
Mike, Jimmy Durkin from The Athletic. Obviously, a lot of your draft evaluations are very public. A lot of guys around the league.
You can bring some bad ones up? Is that where we're going?
No, I'm just curious. I'm sure there's guys on this roster that maybe you have not evaluated highly. Do you wonder what that'll be like if one of those guys walks up to you and say, hey,
I could be honest with you. Like when I was doing Thursday Night Football for NFL Network, every time we did a production meeting, the joke was, don't sit next to Mayock because somebody's going to go off. And it was either really, really good, and I'll give you an example of one day. It was the Eagles at Seattle. Walked into Seattle's locker room the day before, and Earl Thomas came up and hugged me and asked me to go out and take a picture with him and his mom because I was in his, I had him as a top safety, blah, blah, blah. And then we did the Eagles that night, and Shady McCoy came up to me and said, you the guru? You had me number 4. Are you kidding me? Like, he ripped me. And every week that was pretty much what happened. So, I just saw a couple of guys in the corridor that I've worked with and evaluated and been on the field with them at pro days, and they gave me a big hug, wished me well. And when you talk about athletes and ball players, most of them are the same, man. They just want to compete and win, and I think they know that's what I want too.
Like Jerry Macdonald from the Bay Area News Group. Everybody knows about your draft work and this encyclopedic knowledge you have. We've done the conference calls with you where you bring up the most obscure guy and you can give us all these details. I'm curious about the free agency end of it and the pro personnel side of things. How much have you dealt with that in the past, and how that obviously now is a big part of your job?
And it's a good question, Jerry. And I've spent more and more time on the pro side in the last 7 or 8 years. And part of it was driven by the fact that I got Thursday Night Football for our network. And part of it was a couple of coaches around the league who I trust and respect an awful lot and have helped me over the years, said, Mike, if you want to take this thing to another level, you can't just be a college guy comparing college players. You got to take those college guys and say, does he make a pro roster? Is he a backup? Is he a starter? Is he a difference maker? And so 7 or 8 years ago, I made that a priority. So I've watched a heck of a lot more pro tape over the last 7 or 8 years, both to prepare for games I had and then also to try and get better at my craft.
Matt Calhar from the San Francisco Chronicle. Sort of similar to Jerry's question, how comfortable do you feel with things like free agency, contract negotiations, and how much will you lean on people already in the organization for help with that? And then also to Mark and John, how many people did you interview for the position, and how did you satisfy the Rooney role?
One of the things I told these guys, and I'm a big believer in when we met, was that I don't have all the answers. And to sit in there and try to pretend I did, I think would be disingenuous. And the bottom line was, for me, I was very honest. There were some things I needed some help with. I already talked about the mechanics of the daily regimen, So when you start talking about trades and negotiations and draft day and, being on the clock and all that, first time for me and for real, yeah. But for 15 years, have I talked to all the top people in the game about what they do and why they do it. we'll spend a lot of time getting ready for that draft, trust me, and we'll be ready for free agency. And the fact that we've got people like John in the building that has a strong opinion, and it's all film-based, and his background is amazing, and we've already been talking about a lot of that stuff.
I forgot the parts of the question you wanted. Well, we did 5 or 6 intensive interviews of people. I think of the last time when we hired Reggie McKenzie, I said, when somebody asked about the Rooney Rule, I said, we looked around, we finally found a guy with red hair and freckles. And this time we didn't interview any of those, but we took care of the Rooney Rule. As far as naming the names of the people that we talked about and talked to, I prefer if they want to come forward and do that, they can, but there's a good chance we may be hiring them to augment our staff, and so I prefer not to put their names out there for competitive reasons.
Mike, I'm Scott Bair from NBC Sports here in the Bay Area. Kind of a two-part question. One, have you done a deep dive into the current state of the Oakland Raiders roster, and how important, and the second part is, how important is it for you to hit the ground running, considering how much salary cap space that this team has, and the fact that it has 3 draft picks in the top 35? I'm sorry, 4 draft picks in the top 35.
Yeah, it's critical that we hit the ground running. And then the good news for me is I'm already ahead on the college side. I've spent an awful lot of time. So when the lists come out from the NFL teams in July, that's when I start. So I feel pretty good about where I'm on the college side right now. We're going to hit the ground running. I know John's going to push me real hard. And what was the other piece of it? I'm sorry?
Just in terms of, free agency, and have you done a real deep dive into the current state of
And I'm happy you asked that, because I think job number one for me, and this is what I said to John, job number one for me is to get on the same page with the coaching staff about the current Raider roster. I've watched, I think, the last 8 game tapes. I've spent a lot of time just trying to be prepared for my interview with the Raiders and ready to go. So I've got half the season already. I'll get the rest. I'll be sitting down with every position coach with my opinions, their opinions, trying to meld it together. I think the most important thing is we come out with a unified game plan when it's time to go after free agents. We know what kind of money there is. We also know that there's a lot of mistakes made in free agency. So we're going to go after it in a pragmatic and practiced approach.
Mike, Matt Schneidman again. Do you think Derek Carr is the long-term solution at quarterback for this franchise?
That's really part of my study right now. I mean, bottom line, it's easy to pick names right now, but I'm not going to make a comment on anybody on the current roster until I've done a complete deep dive and I've had a chance to meet with all the coaches.
Can you detail what the interview process was like? You mentioned having interviewed in Oakland. Was there a second interview in Kansas City? Can you just, what was the process like?
It's really even hard to describe because I mean, John and I talk a lot of football, so I wasn't sure what was interview and what wasn't, to be really honest with you. The interview we did have that was a little bit more formal, I enjoyed meeting some other people in the Raiders organization. They grilled me pretty good. I enjoyed it because most of it was Jon Gruden and me talking football. And that's, again, we had, I can't tell you how many text messages, phone calls, comments, what do you think about this? What do you just back and forth. I was on East Coast time, he was on West Coast time, which put us on an equal level because, at 4:30 he's texted me, in the morning, and so it's a different kind of process, to be honest with you, and a lot of it had to do with the connection between John and I.
Vic Tafer from The Athletic, producer for John. I got 2 for you. Mike mentioned the learning process. As far as trade phone calls, will he be doing that right away, or will you be doing that?
As far as what in the Vic?
Trade phone calls? Trade?
If it's a good trade, I'll make the calls. If it's a bad trade, it'll be Mayock. That's the way it's going to be around here. We're going to work together. One thing that I really believe is this is a people business, the Oakland Raiders. I don't know about every other building, but we're going to work together hard. There might be teams he's calling. There might be teams that I'm calling. There might be teams that we cross each other up on a little bit, but we're going to work together on this. And if we can get a trade that benefits the Raiders, we're going to make the trade. And we're open for business. I know that.
And what do you see as the biggest needs right now on the roster?
Well, obviously, we've been through an entire season. We saw the Chiefs, the AFC Western champion, yesterday. We got to match up better with the Chiefs. on some key areas. We've got to continue to improve our pass protection and our pass rush. I think it starts there. I think we gave up too many sacks. We didn't get enough. We've got to add some speed to this football team. You saw how fast they are. The Chargers are fast. This is a fast division. The Denver Broncos have two great rushers. We got to continue to improve at all areas. And we have some resources. That doesn't mean there's going to be a player at every position to meet the needs this year. So we got to get on the same page with our scouts, with our entire staff, coaches, scouts, everybody included, all hands on deck. We got a lot of work to do, but I'm really proud of our football team. I want to reiterate that. The effort was outstanding. We got a couple big wins down the stretch. I think the work ethic, I think the way that we prepare, the style of football that we want to play is in place. I love our coordinators. I think Gunther did a great job with our defense. I thought Greg Olson and Tom Cable came in here, implemented a very diverse scheme. We had some success. I think Bisaccia is the best in football on special teams, and we just got to continue to build this squad. And Mayock's addition is a huge, huge day for Raider Nation. And I want to just put an exclamation point on how excited I am, and he'll prove his worth quickly.
Jerry Macdonald from the Bay Area News Group again. John obviously went through the Al Davis interview process a few times before he was hired, and Mark lived it. So I'm just curious whether there's anything that you recall from that session with Mr. Davis and anything that really jumped out at you. And was talking to Al about football similar to talking to John?
Boy, what I remember about that interview process was being in this big conference room, just me and Mr. Davis, and he told me to get up on the board, and he told me to put up a certain formation, a certain front. And while I was doing that, I realized he was already on the next topic. And he was like, who are the top 5 quarterbacks in the draft? Go 1 through 5. And I got done 5, and he changed the topic again. And for 6 to 8 hours, he hopped from topic to topic, and I realized my answers needed to be quick, they needed to be on point, because he's moving on. And that's how he challenged people. And it taught me a little bit about the interviewing process, to be really honest with you. Get you off kilter a little bit and see how you react. When you deal with Jon Gruden, and I learned this a long time ago, okay? I mean, he's looking you right in the eye, he's challenging you, and everything's kind of either a question or a challenge. You better be ready for it. And by the way, there's going to be video backup in the form of a test. So with John, you got to be ready, you got to be prepared, and he's just so quick mentally on the football side. It is a lot like Mr. Davis.
It's kind of like talking to you guys.
Mike, I was curious your philosophy when it comes to roster construction. You mentioned March 13th as the start of the league year and free agency and the cap space that this team carries into 2019. Do you see any potential pitfalls when it comes to free agency, in particular investing in veterans, and how you protect yourself financially as it relates to the salary cap to ensure that you're building your roster the right way?
I think you have to be honest with yourself, okay? If you want to look at a, quote, tier 1 free agent, you know, what's a tier 1 free agent? It means it's a guy that's age appropriate, clean, medically, already a starter in the league and a difference maker. How many of those guys hit the market? Very few. Now, you want to call some of those people tier 1 guys, and they're really not. And you got to be careful. It doesn't mean we don't want to go out there and sign the right guys, but you got to be careful with the major ticket guys. And then the tier 2 guys, I think, are critical for every team. You know, which ones are the emerging players that you can get that won't kill you on the salary cap side? And then the tier 3 guys that fill in your roster and make you better. Special teams. You know, Bisaccia's back there. If I didn't mention special teams, he'd probably quit. So bottom line for me is that it's kind of buyer beware, okay? And there's nothing wrong with being aggressive, but do your homework, understand who that person is as a person in addition to a football player.
Mark, kind of unrelated to this, but since you have about a month to find a home stadium for next year, is there any clarity? Is there a leader in the clubhouse, and when do you expect a decision on that?
Really, we shouldn't be talking about that right now, but I'll just reconfirm what I said before, and that's we'll wait till the season's over. We'll let the emotion get out of the decision-making process, and then we'll go from there. And when we do have a decision, we'll let you know.
Time for 2 more questions, guys.
Mike, as it relates to player evaluation, you've been putting names on a board based on talent, projecting skill sets into the NFL. The difference is now you're projecting how players fit into scheme. How much do you have to familiarize yourself with not just the best players, but the best players for your coaches?
I think that's one of the things I've had to do because I've had all 32 teams to evaluate. So for me, I think the scheme part of it is the guy sitting to your left I've known for 20 years. I know what his scheme is. I know what he likes. And that's a big deal. And then you got to sit down on the offensive side of it with Ole and John and kind of dig deep. I mean, I ran into Tom Cable upstairs. We don't know each other very well, and I just kind of I literally grabbed him because he was, and I just said, Coach, listen, when I want to sit down and watch some film with you. Okay, let's sit down, you and me in the room, and let's just get through some film. I want to know what you like, what you don't like. Let's talk offensive lineman at a different level, and you can teach me. And I'm going to do that with all the coaches. I mean, the way I look at this whole thing is we're here to support the coaches, okay? And we're going to do a great job of understanding what they want and going to get it for them.
John, it's Scott from NBC Bay Area. I was curious if you anticipated making more changes within the scouting and the personnel departments, if you wanted to get some new blood in there, and then also for Mike, maybe even without naming names, do you have maybe some guys in mind who might be a good number 2 or number 3 to you that you can bring in here?
I got 15 years worth of names, okay? And I think anybody on the coaching side or the personnel side that ever wanted to be in this industry or is always has kind of a ready list. Okay, so I have that. I got a lot of guys I respect, but the most important thing is to respect the guys that are here first. Okay, we got 4 months to get after it with the guys in this building, and we're going to do it. And at that point, we can evaluate.
I'll just piggyback on that. It's a tough time right now, obviously, for our scouts. And I want to assure you that Sean Herrock is excellent at what he's done. And got a lot of confidence in his history here and the scouts that we do have. And Mike is going to evaluate them. We're going to give him every opportunity to continue to be a part of this. But I don't foresee any changes, but I do think Mike is going to talk to a lot of people. And if he finds somebody out there that can come in and have the same vision that we have, we're going to jump on the table to get that guy in here. We're going to lead the league in effort. I will not make any other promises than that. Mayock and I will be committed to work together. We're going to be passionate about what we do. We're going to be loyal to one another, and we're going to lead the league in effort. And if we don't, I want to meet the 2 that beats us in that.
Can I call you Gruden?
Call me
now
whatever you
you're
want.
calling me Mayock? This
Yeah.
is good. This is good.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks,
Happy New
everybody.
Year,
I appreciate
everybody.
it. Happy New Year.
Great to meet you guys.